Empathy-driven loss is a phenomenon that is nearly impossible to foresee, as potential victims often misinterpret the warning signs. It is the kind of loss that occurs when you hurt a highly empathetic person. The danger lies not in the severity of any single act, but in the fact that you fail to realize the consequences until the entire debt comes due at once. To understand why this happens, we must look at how the makeup of highly empathetic people differs from that of the average person. Studies on mirror neuron systems reveal that for some individuals, the neurological response to witnessing another person's emotional state is almost identical to the response experienced when undergoing that state themselves. This is not sensitivity born of weakness. Rather, it is a unique biological configuration that allows them to read what remains unsaid and sense what is being concealed. In a healthy relationship, this ability fosters a rare and profound connection. In an unbalanced relationship, however, it becomes a conduit for pain that flows in only one direction. The price of this configuration is an inability to simply ignore things. When someone nearby is distressed, their nervous system registers it whether they want it to or not, and once registered, they are compelled to process it. Yet, the tragedy lies in how times they process it instead of merely reacting. They absorb. Instead of reflecting the pain back onto the person who caused it, they transform it into empathy for that very person. This process of transmutation occurs almost automatically and exacts a far heavier toll than is apparent on the surface. Whenever a highly empathetic person is treated unfairly, their first thought is not of their own rights, but of the other person's circumstances. Are you under pressure? Have you just been through something? Did you mean to do that? And once an explanation is found, whether logical or forced, the pain is instantly reclassified into something understandable, forgivable, something that can be temporarily set aside. In clinical psychology, the erosion caused by constantly absorbing the emotions of others is known as compassion fatigue. This phenomenon is frequently observed in nurses caring for critically ill patients, therapists, and social workers. Its most significant characteristic is that it does not happen suddenly. Rather, it unfolds as a process of erosion over months, during which the affected individual continues to perform their job well and remains dedicated to the person before them until the day they realize they have long since become hollow inside. Notably, this phenomenon is not limited to professional settings. It occurs daily in ordinary families wherever a person is constantly required to navigate emotions from both sides. And when that energy is depleted, the result is not a sudden breakup. It is a silent withdrawal, happening bit by bit, often without the individuals involved even realizing what they are doing. By the time the outcome becomes visible, the process is already complete, leading to a consequence few are prepared for. What is lost is not a relationship that can be mended, but a door that has closed forever. Part 1. Why you don't realize you've hurt them. Every system has warning mechanisms designed to prevent damage before it becomes severe. In typical relationships, that mechanism is pushback. The person being mistreated might argue back, sulk, or issue an ultimatum. These reactions are unpleasant for the recipient, yet they serve an essential function. They provide information. You know you've crossed a line because someone tells you so. For highly compassionate people, however, this mechanism is almost entirely disabled. The reason lies in the order of information processing within their minds. When a hurtful action occurs, their first reflex isn't to acknowledge the pain, but to seek out the cause from the perspective of the person who caused it. This search for a cause happens so rapidly that it precedes the actual sensation of pain. Once the cause is identified, the issue is deemed resolved. Nothing more needs to be said. Nothing needs to be confronted. The pain remains, but it is viewed as understandable, and anything understandable is not worth making a fuss over. Consequently, that information never leaves their heads to reach you. You continue to behave the same way not out of cruelty, but because you are operating on flawed data. From your perspective, all signs indicate the relationship is stable. They still smile. They still check in on you. They are still the first to text after an argument. If something were wrong, surely they would have said something. This is where most people make a mistake, and it is a perfectly logical one. We are taught that silence implies consent, and that those who do not complain have no grievances. For most people, this rule holds true. For empaths, however, it is entirely incorrect, and the degree of error is directly proportional to how much they care about you. The more they love you, the harder they try to make everything seem okay within their value system. Making you feel guilty is a form of harm they wish to avoid inflicting. There is another layer that makes the issue even harder to detect. The human brain excels at pattern recognition, but it generally identifies patterns only when events are viewed side by side. For empaths, each hurtful incident is processed immediately and rationalized in isolation. One time, it was because you were busy. Another time, because you were tired. Yet another, because you were dealing with family issues. Each explanation seems reasonable when viewed on its own. And because it makes sense, the incident is closed off, filed away in a separate mental compartment, and removed from active memory. Consequently, the facts are never viewed together. The pattern is obvious to outsiders, but invisible to those directly involved. This is why friends often spot the problem years before the individuals themselves do, and why outside advice is rarely effective. No one can convince another person to see the big picture when the individual pieces of that picture are tucked away in separate drawers. Beyond this cognitive mechanism, there is a deeper factor at play: identity. For those who derive their self-worth from being a good person, pushback is not merely an unpleasant interaction. It strikes at the very core of who they are. To them, asserting one's rights equates to selfishness, and speaking up about hurt equates to weakness. Imposing conditions implies that their love is conditional, and conditional love is no longer the kind of love they were taught to understand. These notions are often instilled in children from an early age. As they learn that they are loved only when they are useful, they grow up with an unspoken rule that their worth lies in what they can do for others, rather than in their own existence. With that rule ingrained in their minds, speaking up is not merely a difficult choice. It is almost unthinkable. In short, you are in a paradoxical situation. The person you are most likely to hurt is the one least likely to tell you so. The silence you perceive is not proof that you are doing the right thing. Rather, it is evidence that the warning system has been disabled, and harm is accumulating in a place beyond your reach. Part 2. The price being exacted out of sight. If the empath does not resist, the question arises, where does the pain go? It does not simply vanish. There is no psychological mechanism that allows an emotion to be absorbed without leaving a trace. What actually happens is that it transforms into something else, specifically a gradual withdrawal of emotional investment. This process operates according to a specific rule, well documented in the psychology of chronic stress. Small, repetitive stressors inflict more damage on the nervous system than a single major shock, because the body never fully returns to a state of rest. It maintains a constant, low-level state of vigilance, bracing for the next impact, and it is this prolonged alertness, rather than the impacts themselves, that depletes one's resources so rapidly. This explains a phenomenon that might otherwise seem puzzling. Major traumas are rarely what drive an empath to leave. An overt betrayal is actually far easier to handle because it grants the victim the right to feel pain, the right to be angry, and the right to walk away without having to justify themselves to anyone. Their social circle will naturally side with them. Minor hurts lack that privilege. They are too insignificant to serve as evidence. Telling friends that the other person frequently forgets to check in on you often elicits only a puzzled look and advice not to overreact. Even the person involved may feel they are overreacting. Consequently, they remain silent, and because they do not speak up, the pain goes unresolved. It is merely suppressed. It is the accumulated level of suppressed pain that determines the outcome, not the severity of any single incident. Meanwhile, physical signs begin to manifest before the mind even grasps what is happening. There is persistent fatigue despite getting enough sleep. A sense of heaviness arises whenever the phone rings. Exhaustion sets in after social interactions that used to be joyful. The need for solitude grows not out of animosity, But because the nervous system requires quiet time to recover, there is a more distinct symptom, often mistaken by compassionate people for self-neglect or indifference, the phenomenon where a minor request suddenly triggers an inexplicable resistance. Someone might ask for a short ride, yet the internal reaction is one of intense resentment bordering on bitterness. Those experiencing this often blame themselves for becoming selfish. In reality, however, they are not reacting to the specific request itself, but to the cumulative weight of all the prior requests that went unacknowledged and unreciprocated. Alongside this physical depletion, a deeper, more decisive shift occurs in the fate of the relationship. Initially, care is given willingly, bringing joy to the giver. Later, as it becomes the norm, its nature changes. It is no longer viewed as a gift, but as en obligation. The giver continues to provide. Yet the driving force shifts from genuine desire to the avoidance of guilt. This is the most critical transitional phase, and it unfolds entirely in silence. Outwardly, nothing appears different. The messages, the presence, and the level of attentiveness remain the same. Yet, the core essence has completely transformed. What sustains the relationship is no longer affection, but inertia and a sense of duty, both of which have a limited shelf life. Accompanying this shift is another adjustment, one that is subtler, yet more devastating: the lowering of expectations. Expectations are what sustain a relationship, as they embody the belief that things can improve. When a compassionate person begins to lower their expectations to avoid disappointment, they are engaging in a perfectly rational act of self-preservation. Yet, the price of this self-protection is the simultaneous withdrawal of their emotional investment in a shared future. From that moment on, they remain by your side in the present but cease to envision you in their future. There is no specific date marking this change, nor is there a conversation acknowledging it. It simply happens, and the debt accumulated throughout the process reveals itself only once, at the very moment you least expect it. Part 3. The consequence: losing the only person who understands you without needing an explanation. When losing an empath, someone with a profound capacity for empathy, most people initially misjudge the true nature of that loss. They assume they have simply lost a friend, a lover, or a familiar source of emotional support. It often takes a long time for them to realize what has truly vanished. What is lost is not merely a specific individual. It is a state of being, a state so familiar that its presence once went unnoticed. Consider what an empath brings to your life. You return home after a terrible day without needing to recount events chronologically. The moment you walk through the door, they already understand the situation. You send a seemingly ordinary text message, yet they sense the underlying issue beneath the words. You speak clumsily out of frustration, but they hear what you truly mean to convey rather than just the words that tumbled out. That experience nurtures something humans instinctively crave: the feeling of being truly understood without the need to explain, prove yourself, or maintain a specific image. In attachment psychology, this is considered the foundation of a sense of security, and it has a tangible impact on a person's daily stress levels. When that state vanishes, the initial feeling is often not sadness, but a strange, persistent sense of inconvenience in even the most trivial matters. You tell a story to a new acquaintance and spend 10 minutes explaining the context details that once required only half a sentence to convey. You remain silent all evening. Yet no one asks if something is wrong, because to the average person, silence is simply silence. You say you're fine, and people believe it instantly. They trust your words, and for the first time, you realize that for years, there was someone who never believed that claim. That is the moment you understand what you have lost. It is not merely someone willing to listen, for listeners can be found anywhere. What you have lost is someone capable of hearing the things left unsaid, a rare gift, far rarer than you ever imagined. There is another aspect to this loss that few anticipate. An empathetic person does not just understand you, they safeguard the image of who you truly are. Through years spent together, they hold on to your life story in its entirety. The confidences shared at 3 in the morning, the fears admitted only once and never mentioned again, the real reasons behind decisions you justified to the outside world with different explanations. They preserve it all without judgment, and never using it as a weapon against you in arguments. To them, you are not the persona you project to the world, but your whole self, flaws and all, including the parts you aren't proud of. When they leave, that entire treasury of memories leaves with them. You retain the memories, yet you lose the only person who witnessed them, the only one with whom you didn't have to start over from scratch. You realize there are chapters of your life you will never recount to anyone else, simply because you no longer have the energy to rebuild that level of trust. This gives rise to a frequently cited paradox, one directly linked to the mechanism mentioned earlier. When you are together, that profound understanding feels invisible. It is a constant presence that demands nothing. The human brain tends to overlook things that are always there. Only when that presence vanishes does the void become palpable, not merely as a fond memory, but as a genuine absence in your daily life. This explains a phenomenon that might seem puzzling at first. Many people only realize the depth of their love for someone months after that person has left. It is not because they are unfeeling. It is simply because human cognition is wired to notice change rather than stability. And an empath embodies that stability perfectly. There is one final detail that makes this loss far more profound than ordinary ones. Empaths are rarely replaced, and the reason lies not in sentiment, but in probability. People capable of directly sensing the emotional states of others are inherently rare. Even fewer retain this ability into adulthood, as most people learn to erect defensive walls, and within that small remaining group, encountering the right person at the right time and in the right circumstances to forge a profound connection is a stroke of fortune unlikely to be repeated. Thus, when someone claims they will find another person, they are theoretically correct. Yet they overlook the most difficult part. They will indeed find someone else to be with, but rediscovering an experience where no explanation is needed, that is an entirely different matter. And for many, it is something that never happens again in their lifetime. Part 4. The most cruel consequence: they remain kind to you, yet you have become an outsider. What makes this outcome harder to accept than anything else is the fact that an empath almost never harbors hatred toward you. They do not block your number. They do not badmouth you to mutual acquaintances. They do not fabricate a narrative that casts you as the villain, simply to make it easier for themselves to move on. If you run into each other by chance, they will still greet you, ask how you are doing, and smile at you just as they used to. If you face genuine hardship and turn to them, they will likely be willing to help. Precisely because of this, people often take a long time to realize that they lost that person long ago. The reason lies in something few people notice. An empath's kindness is an innate trait, not a reward reserved for a select few special individuals. They treat you with kindness just as they would a stranger on the street, a new colleague, or even someone who has hurt them. What they reserve for a special few is something entirely different. The privilege of entering their innermost world, the place where they keep things they share with no one else. What is withdrawn is never their kindness. What is withdrawn is the right to enter that private world. This distinction reveals itself through details that only someone who was once close would notice. In the past, they would tell you about the things worrying them. Now, they say everything is fine. In the past, they would call you the moment they had good news. Now, you learn the news through someone else. In the past, they would have engaged in spirited debate with you because mutual understanding mattered to them. Now, they simply nod and let it slide. On the surface, things remain polite. Deep down, however, you have shifted from their inner circle to the ranks of outsiders, a transition completed before you even realized it was happening. Here, we must discuss time's equanimity, as it is the most misunderstood sign in this entire dynamic. As long as a person holds on to anger or resentment, or keeps rehashing the past, they still care about the relationship's outcome. People only argue over things they still wish to preserve. Anger, however unpleasant, is a form of connection. As long as it exists, the relationship can still be salvaged. Equanimity lies on the other side of that boundary. It emerges only after the process of evaluation has concluded and a final verdict has been rendered. An empath stops being angry with you not because they have forgiven you in the conventional sense, but because the relationship's outcome no longer affects them. Psychologically, this state is closer to letting go than to forgiveness, and its defining characteristic is stability. Once reached, it is virtually irreversible. This leads to the cruelest aspect of the situation, a temporal disconnect that few people notice. The day you begin to realize you have lost them marks the first day of your own grieving process. For them, however, that first day passed long ago. Throughout the 2 years you believed everything was fine. They quietly cycled through a full spectrum of emotions: pain, hope, disappointment, acceptance, and finally, a sense of calm. By the time you panicked and tried to mend things, the two of you were standing at points years apart on the very same path. That is why apologies at this stage almost always fail. No matter how sincere they may be, an apology is meant to heal an open wound. Yet their wound has long since scarred over. You are knocking on the door of a house whose owner moved out seasons ago. The fact that the door still stands is precisely what misleads you. There is a phrase often used by empathetic people in this situation, one frequently mistaken for mere pleasantries. They say they are no longer angry, that the past is behind them, and that they wish you the best. The listener often interprets this to mean the door is still ajar. In reality, the opposite is true. Someone who still wants to return would not speak that way. Instead, they would discuss what needs to change, what they expect from you, and what both parties need to do differently. Only when the prospect of a shared future has completely vanished do people speak of one another gently, without making any demands. One final point is needed to complete the picture and ensure this isn't misconstrued as a threat. An empathetic person does not leave to punish anyone. They have no intention of teaching you a lesson, nor do they scheme to make you regret your past actions. What is happening is simply the mechanism of a system that has exhausted its resources and automatically switched to self-preservation mode. The sense of loss you experience is merely an inevitable consequence, not their objective. This distinction is crucial, as it dispels the last illusion many people cling to. If their departure were a form of punishment, the situation could potentially be reversed once you demonstrated genuine remorse. But since this isn't an act of punishment, there is nothing to reverse or restore. You cannot persuade a dried-up well to fill with water again simply by apologizing. Ultimately, the most painful consequence isn't that they vanish from your life. Often, they remain still in your contacts list, still occasionally dropping an emoji on your posts. The true consequence lies in living the rest of your life with the realization that there was once someone who truly understood you, that it is all over, and that this ending didn't stem from some earth-shattering event, but merely from 1,000 times you inadvertently failed to pay attention. If this entire story could be distilled into a single core lesson, it would be this: an empath doesn't leave you simply because you did something terrible. They leave because you failed to do one small thing, and that failure repeated itself over the course of years. That small thing is simply asking a follow-up question. When they say they're fine, ask again. When they fall silent for longer than usual, pay attention to the nuances of that silence. When they listen to you talk for 40 minutes, take 5 minutes to ask about them. It requires no complex skills. It is simply a matter of consistently showing care for someone whose nature prevents them from ever actively demanding that attention. This is the crucial point to which the previous 4 parts have been leading. Their warning system doesn't work. They won't tell you when you are pushing them to their breaking point. There will be no final warning. By the time you realize something is wrong, it may already be too late. Therefore, the responsibility to care lies entirely with you, and you need to act now, rather than waiting until you sense trouble before you start paying attention. Conversely, if you recognize yourself in this story as the person who always plays the role of the understanding, accommodating one, there is something worth considering. Setting boundaries does not diminish your kindness. It is simply a way to protect the very source of that kindness, ensuring it remains sustainable rather than quietly draining away. Speaking up about what hurts you is not a burden on others. On the contrary, it offers the other person a valuable opportunity to make amends before things reach a point of no return. If today's video reminds you of someone, please take a moment to hit the like button so this content can reach a wider audience. If you'd like to keep following analyses on human psychology and relationships, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss future videos. I would also love to hear your thoughts in the comments section. In your opinion, what is the earliest sign that someone is quietly withdrawing from a relationship? And is it possible to spot it in time? Your answer might help someone reevaluate their own relationship before it's too late. Thank you for watching until the end. See you in the next video.